Hello there, and thanks for joining me today. I'm Alessandro Fael Garcia, and I am a technical marketing engineer at NGINX for anything related to NGINX's security offerings. Today, I'd like to welcome you to NGINX App Protect 101, a beginner's level class introducing the world of NGINX's security offerings. In this short intro lecture, I will cover everything you need to get started with NGINX's App Protect web application firewall and NGINX App Protect's denial of service protection. And don't worry, there's no prerequisites. Before we get started, let's set the stage real quick. What is NGINX? Well, NGINX began its life as a web server and reverse proxy, but over time, new features have been developed and released, including NGINX modules such as what brings us here today, NGINX App Protect. Since its original inception in 2004, NGINX has increased in popularity, and as of today, it's the most used web server globally according to the latest Netcraft surveys. And there's a good reason for it. If you'll forgive the pun, NGINX is very much like a Formula 1 car. NGINX is both blazingly fast and highly performant, thanks to a carefully curated engine, or codebase, and a very lightweight encasing. NGINX is only around 8 megabytes on Alpine Linux. Naturally, this high performance translates across all NGINX offerings, including NGINX App Protect. Cool, so now that we set the stage, let's move to the main focus of this lecture, NGINX App Protect. NGINX App Protect is NGINX's natively built security solution, running natively as an NGINX module to take advantage of NGINX's highly performant codebase. It is based in state-of-the-art F5 security technology, and it uses declarative policies as well as NGINX configs to enable security as code and native integration with DevOps tools and CI/CD pipelines. This means that NGINX App Protect accelerates time to market and reduces costs by enabling built-in DevSecOps automated security. With NGINX App Protect, you can shift security left and integrate it earlier in your development process. Now, what does this mean? Well, traditionally, you have your software or full-stack developers develop your app. Then they'd hand over that app to the DevOps team. The DevOps team will deploy the app. And then the SecOps team will come around and make sure that the app was secure and there was no obvious security gaps in it. With NGINX App Protect, once the developer finishes developing the app, DevOps can deploy your app and secure it at the same time, and thus enable basically a DevSecOps team to work on your app directly. To further illustrate this point, let me show you this diagram here. Basically, NGINX App Protect can be deployed anywhere. It is universally compatible, and wherever NGINX can run, if it's a somewhat newish distribution, you will also be able to run NGINX App Protect. Whether that's a VM load balancer, or a software load balancer, or a Docker container as a microservice, or a Kubernetes cluster, or a Kubernetes ingress controller, a bare metal solution, or even an API gateway. In all these places where you would maybe have NGINX running, you can also deploy NGINX App Protect at the same time with NGINX to secure and serve your applications. Now, NGINX App Protect has two offerings, NGINX App Protect WAF and NGINX App Protect DOS. NGINX App Protect WAF was the original NGINX App Protect offering released last year, and it's a web application firewall solution running natively on NGINX. Then NGINX App Protect DOS as NGINX's denial of service solution, again running natively on NGINX. Let me start first by focusing a little bit on NGINX App Protect and its web application firewall protection offering. NGINX App Protect WAF uses F5 app security technology to enable a very highly efficient solution compared to much security and other WAFs, as well as a much simpler and straightforward user experience. NGINX App Protect WAF offers high confidence signatures, and it has a very low rate of false positives. You can use NGINX App Protect WAF to protect your servers, or your gateways, or your containers, or microservices from all sorts of security threats and exploits, amongst which 6 of the most common ones would be command execution threats, cross-site scripting, information leakage exploits, SQL injections, authentication authorization attacks, or buffer overflow exploits. And just to go into a little bit more detail on what the top 3 types of attack, we have command executions, which are injection attacks in which arbitrary code is executed on your host system via a vulnerable application. If your whole ecosystem or your whole software stack is not properly isolated and it's running on the same server, or not properly replicated, what this means is that the attacker can use this basically remote commands to access sensitive data on your server, or wreak havoc on your apps, break something up. You never know. Then you have cross-site scripting, which is one of the most common injection attacks and one of the most heard about attacks. These are attacks in which the attacker deploys a malicious script or code extension in your web app or your extension, and then when a user is using an extension or web app and you're writing some sensitive data, maybe it's some payment details, that a malicious script could potentially run in the background and send your sensitive credit card data to your attacker's server, and thus put your data at risk. And then we've got SQL injections. SQL injections are injection attacks using a half-formed SQL query via the input data of any application form. Going back to the cross-site scripting example, maybe it's your credit card details, maybe it's your payment details, maybe you're just logging into your application, maybe it's a search form in your application, doesn't really matter. Any form that accepts user data and processes it is vulnerable to an SQL injection. And what an SQL injection can do is play around with your database. It can fetch sensitive data from all your users. It can maybe delete your database altogether if it's an attack meant to do harm and not to steal data. It could merge databases together, it could wreak havoc. It's really up to the attacker once you get access to the database. Now again, these are just 3 of the most common ones, 3 of the most common types of attack. NGINX App Protect WAF, however, will help you block any type of exploit and threat. It is configured by default to protect you against the OWASP top 10 vulnerabilities, but it also includes a whole other suite of attacks and exploits that it protects you against. Finally, let's go real quickly over how to configure NGINX App Protect. It's very simple. You just have to install the App Protect WAF module. Very similar to command to install NGINX, whatever sudo apt install NGINX plus App Protect, and that'll do the trick. Once you have it installed, you can load the module using the load module directive, and then enable the module using App Protect enable on. And if you wish to change the default policy file, maybe you have some specific needs, some specific use cases, you can use the App Protect policy file to point to your custom policy file. There's a whole range of directives you can then also tweak. You can enable security logs. You can set up which server you want to add as your syslog server and whatnot. You can read all the documentation online at docs.nginx.com, but basically you can customize it to your heart's desire. Now moving on, let's talk about NGINX App Protect denial of service. NGINX App Protect does is NGINX's denial of service protection offering, and it's very unique in that it uses a custom-built user behavior analysis and service behavior checks algorithm to defend against hard-to-detect new generation Layer 7 denial of service attacks. This algorithm, it's always learning, it's always reacting to strange new user behaviors, and thus detecting new vectors of attack and blocking against them. Amongst 6 of the most common types of attack, you have 3 new generation attacks, which are the ones on the left here: slow lorries, slow read, and slow post. Then you have the most common types of attack, such as a flood attack, distributed attacks, or a challenger collapser attack, amongst many others. But these 3 types of new generation DOS attacks, those are the key ones that NGINX App Protect helps you fight against, because they're very hard to detect. And that's where NGINX App Protect does user behavior analysis comes into play and manages to detect that something is up with these types of attacks. Just to go very quickly, I go over what each one of these new generation of these attacks are. There's slow lorries. When a slow lorries attack, the attacker connects to the server and sends partial request headers at a very slow pace. The server keeps the connection open while it's waiting for the remainder of the headers. Over time, if it's a very long list of headers, or the request rate is very low, very slow, the server resources are consumed, and legitimate requests have a hard time going through, or if they go through, they will go through at a very slow rate. Slow read attacks, on the other hand, send a well-formed HTTP request with a well-formed series of headers. They send everything at once, but then they proceed to read, hence the name slow read, the response at a very sluggish speed, if at all. Maybe it'll just hold on to the response and not ever read it. Again, over time, server resources are consumed, legitimate requests are prevented from going through, or if they go through at a very slow rate. And then we have slow post attacks. In this type of attack, the attacker sends a legitimate HTTP post header to the server, then request, but then proceeds to send the actual message body very slowly, or alternatively sends a very large message body. Now, the server sees the message as being a valid message. It probably is. It probably is just like a very long string of garbage data. So the server, not knowing any better, keeps the connection open, waiting for the full body to arrive. The full body takes ages to arrive, if it ever finishes arriving. While the connection is open, the server resources for that connection are consumed. Legitimate requests have a hard time going through, or to go through at a very slow rate. Now, if you combine all these 3 types of attack at the same time, or you send multiple slow post requests at the same time, you can see how it could be very easy to saturate your server. And thus, why that adaptive protection based on user and service behavior is key, since NGINX App Protect will be able to detect that something is up. This is not a normal request from that given user or given IP, given client, and terminate the connection before the server is totally saturated. Finally, configuring NGINX App Protect is very simple. It's as simple as configuring NGINX App Protect WAF. All you have to do is install the module, load the module, and set App Protect enable to on. Similarly to NGINX App Protect WAF, you can customize the policy file if you want, if you have some specific needs or use cases, but if not, the recommendation is to always use the default policy file since it has some very good sensible defaults. Alright, so I've gone over NGINX App Protect WAF and NGINX App Protect DOS. They both sound very interesting, very promising. You probably maybe want to take them for a spin, test them out, but you might be wondering, they do sound complementary. Can you maybe run them together, side by side, in your NGINX infrastructure? Well, the answer is yes. You can combine NGINX App Protect WAF and NGINX App Protect DOS to achieve ultimate protection and ultimate safety against all threats and exploits. By putting them together, NGINX App Protect DOS will act as your first layer of defense, preventing any potential denial of service attacks from going through and crashing your NGINX server, as well as your NGINX App Protect WAF. And then you can put your NGINX App Protect WAF as your second layer of defense to, block any incoming exploits or threats, such as SQL injections or cross-site scripting. And then maybe after all that, you have your NGINX server running as a web server, as an app server, an API gateway. And that web server or API gateway now can safely run 24/7, free of any threats and injection attempts coming through thanks to App Protect DOS and App Protect WAF. Now, if you want to try out NGINX App Protect, it's very simple to do so. It's included in the NGINX Plus free trial, both the trial for App Protect WAF and App Protect Denial of Service. You can get, or you can request a trial on nginx.com/free trial request and take it for a spin. And with that being said, class is now adjourned. I hope you had a fantastic time here today with me, and do not hesitate to get in touch with us to learn more about NGINX App Protect. My name is Alessandro Fael Garcia. I'm a technical marketing engineer at NGINX, and thanks for joining me today.